Alright, so I recently played through Viva Pinata. It's a very weird game in terms of Rare's legacy. Like, I remember when it came out and it seemed to do decently well. I believe it, got a cartoon series alongside it. They were able to, promote it a lot in that. Didn't, hear anything too bad, at least in comparison to, Rare's other post Microsoft buyout efforts. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel like as time moved on and people looked back more broad at that era, it sort of just slips through the cracks, being that one tiny light in a huge amount of darkness, I guess you can say. I saw someone, though, a little bit ago say that one of their favorite games of all time was Viva Pinata Trouble in Paradise, and that almost inspired me to try out this series because that's just not something I've ever heard before. A good game, sure. Generally, it's forgotten, though, and you don't hear people even, reference it too much this long later, let alone hold it in such high regard. I did wind up really enjoying it myself. I did just, start with the first game. The closest comparison I can think of is Zoo Tycoon. The big difference and the thing that I feel like really set the game apart, though, was being able to meet certain conditions in order to unlock resident pinatas and then go on to meet additional conditions in order to romance and level yourself up, gain access to, more pinata who can possibly show up. As opposed to Zoo Tycoon, which was more buy what you need. Oh, you leveled up. Now you can buy more stuff. There's, it's a little deeper than that. You also get through, different achievements and that cute little, I guess, FMV-like cutscenes. It honestly reminds me, I don't know if anyone remembers when Hasbro in the late 90s, I think they had the Atari brand at that point, but they had a lot of that corny FMV cutscenes and everything they were putting out, and it reminded me of that, which isn't a bad thing. That's kind of a little nostalgic for me. We'll admit some of the later game conditions did get a little frustrating, if I'm going to be honest. Right there, actually, you can see in the gameplay the dragonfly right there. I think you needed, I forget the name of the plant, but you needed 16 of them. And I probably should have just, gone above and beyond, but you had to wait for them to bloom. And then right there it says 12 bulrushes. But, them being bloomed is when it counts towards that 12. But then if they're bloomed too long, they'll automatically, I don't know what you want to call it, it'll wither away and drop a new seed and the flower or whatever that came with it. And when you were like me and had things off cycle and were only, really trying for, the 12 or maybe just a little bit more, 14, 15, it was frustrating because the dragonfly wouldn't show up every day. And I just remember the one time it was like, okay, good, I finally got 12 of them fully bloomed, and then it didn't show up for 2 days. And then it showed up again on the third day, but then it had that auto process where it went away, I had to replant, and guess what? I was under 12 again. I did wind up getting most pinatas that showed up. I mean, maybe there was some obscure one that, I don't know, required a ridiculous amount of long grass or water that I never met. But besides that, the only ones I missed were the Frizzly Bear and I think Perry Bro, the parrot. I don't know if my Frizzly Bear glitched out because right there it needs to eat 8 fir cones and a couple things of honey, and right there, that's the first time I saw it this day, this, visit. But eventually later on, it went away for a while and it came back and I had to start all over, which kind of sucked, but it wasn't that big of a deal, I guess. But then each time it visited after, it would start from the very beginning, even if it was visiting again the next day. So I don't know what happened there, why progress wasn't carrying over. I know sometimes there's two, like you see right there. But even then, like I said, I had it, 4-ish days in a row, and each time it had me starting at the very beginning, and I was done. I gave up on that one. And then the parrot thing, I had its conditions met for like a while, and it just never showed up. I don't know if that's another one that glitched. I saw it show up in the background one other time after I sold all the stuff that would have given me the conditions, where, it was really too late to recover. I already committed to not doing it. But I don't really know what happened there. Normally, too, if you go overboard with conditions, I felt like maybe this is in my own head, but it would make, whatever pinata you're going for more likely to show up. And, I even had that with the parrot, too, and nothing. Went through, I think, an entire banana tree cycle or two, I believe, was the one condition. The trees last a pretty long time, too, so. And just in general, some of the other conditions, I did consider, stopping at a certain point when you had, like, it needs to eat 6 to 8 things, because normally you don't get it in one visit, and with the whole grizzly bear situation, I wasn't sure if you always had access to, the ability to, build up through multiple visits, but it was one of those things. By the time I was kind of done and, maybe ready to move on, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll give it a try with some of these other pinatas, see if they have the same issue, and I none of them did. I even tried again later, with the grizzly bear in general, and still the same issue. And that was a pretty big shame, too, because there was some Banjo-Kazooie references. You can see the statue right there in the gameplay. And I think it's a tack thing. It was throwing jigsaw pieces. I'm sure there was other references if I got it to be a resident that, I won't be able to see directly. I guess I could look it up. There was other frustrations, though, a little early on. I'll admit it was more of, my personal approach. I just really needed to focus on only a couple things at a time. Mainly, what am I looking to residence? Yes. What am I looking to romance next? Because I originally was trying to, keep, a little bit of everything in the garden, not knowing that wasn't really possible. And it got really frustrating because it didn't feel like I was making progress for a bit, because I was going back and forth, breaking up fights, healing sick pinatas, and trying to keep everyone happy. Eventually, when I, just gave up, maybe sold some that I knew were, going to conflict with others, it was, all good after that point. And money was an issue earlier, too. But then I found out that the seemingly best way to get money was through a taffly farm, to, have it go through that torch right there, turn into a redhead or red hot, and sell it. And then even then, my initial approach was try to farm tafflies. But then tafflies, sort of run around all over the place, and it was hard to, get them to eat the romance candy or eat, I think it had a flower prerequisite. Sorry. And then, to find the two of them to, do the romance, it was just a pain in the ass. And I was just better off selling all my tafflies, because then they naturally just sort of show up occasionally, and then just turning it into a red hot and selling it immediately. And that gave me a pretty good flow of money throughout the rest of the game. I didn't really need to worry about it too much. I was wondering, though, at that earlier point, if it would have been better with a mouse and keyboard, just the whole flow of everything. I did see it did have a PC port, the first game, not the second one. So there was some temptation to maybe look into that, but I eventually got a hold of things. But I don't know, maybe I would have been able to, do that initial taffly farm, or keep a wider array of pinata in the garden. Overall, though, like I said, I definitely at some point want to, get into Trouble in Paradise, but my understanding, and I didn't do a lot of research, just, a quick Google or whatever, is that it's almost more of a enhanced, version with, quality of life stuff, more, pinatas and other items and such. And I don't know, it seems like it would be doing the same thing again. So with that being said, I could see that being, a bit further down the line. I'm not looking to, if that's the case, getting into it anytime soon. I would rather, I feel like this almost falls into a similar, category as a game like Harvest Moon Story of Seasons, and there you'd at least, have a different map in that to, work with outside of your farm. So I feel like, if I was to play something like that, I would probably lean more towards one of them. I feel like some of the other games I have in those series might feel a little more new compared to each other, compared to the two Viva Pinata games. But, I could be completely wrong about that. That's just a general analysis. Oh, this was a pain in the ass, too. I occasionally got rid of pinatas that I really shouldn't have gotten rid of. Luckily, it is easier after you do the initial romance and, residence, that they do give you a bit of a shortcut for some money with all of that. So that's appreciated, but it should be interesting whenever I get to it, too, to not, have some of the growing pains of, the first few sessions I had here when, I had, a non-optimal gameplay style to, just have, early game go a little smoother and see how that affects late game. But like I said, probably a while away, given my knowledge right now.